Echoes of the Forgotten. Chapter 1. The Invitation. In the remote outskirts of Black Hollow, shrouded in perpetual fog and fringed with crooked trees that seemed to lean away from it, stood the once grand Delacroix Manor. Its decrepit facade loomed over visiting thrill-seekers and urban explorers like a judge pronouncing sentence. Tales of its haunted history whispered among locals and echoed throughout the nearby towns. Stories of disappearances, of screams heard on windless nights, of lights seen moving through empty rooms. The charm of adventure beckoned a group of 5 friends: Max, Lisa, Greg, Sarah, and Jake. They were in their mid-20s, that age where mortality still felt theoretical and the boundary between bravery and stupidity remained pleasantly blurred. Max, the group's unofficial leader, had always been drawn to the supernatural. He ran a moderately successful paranormal investigation YouTube channel and saw Delacroix Manor as his ticket to viral fame. Armed with conspiracy theories, ghost hunting gadgets, and an ego that occasionally exceeded his common sense, he'd been planning this expedition for months. Lisa, his girlfriend of 2 years, was skeptical yet intrigued. She'd grown up in a household that dismissed such things as superstition, but she couldn't deny the appeal of the unknown. And if she was honest, she came mostly to make sure Max didn't do anything too stupid. Someone had to be the voice of reason. Greg often played the role of the Joker, skeptical but always needing to impress, especially Sarah. He covered his nervousness with humor and bravado, never quite admitting that the stories about Delacroix Manor had kept him up the previous night, scrolling through incident reports and old newspaper articles. Sarah, with her affinity for the eerie and ethereal, was the group's artist. She saw beauty in decay, poetry in ruins. She was the one with the camera, not Max's paranormal equipment, but a proper film camera that she used to document abandoned places. To her, Delacroix Manor was a canvas of tragedy and time. Jake, the most cautious of them, came along for support, albeit with a hint of dread gracing his features. He was Max's oldest friend, dating back to elementary school, and he'd learned that sometimes the best way to keep Max safe was to be there when things inevitably went wrong. He'd packed a first aid kit, extra batteries, and a growing sense that this trip was a mistake. One crisp autumn evening, as October bled toward November and the trees surrendered their last leaves, the friends decided to spend the night in Delacroix Manor. They were enticed by stories of how others had fled screaming, by the legend of the Lady in White, by the promise of proof, or at least content. Armed with flashlights, sleeping bags, an assortment of snacks and Max's arsenal of ghost hunting equipment, they piled into Greg's aging van and made the drive to Black Hollow. The town itself was unwelcoming. The locals at the gas station had gone silent when Max asked for directions to the manor. The clerk, an elderly woman with rheumy eyes, had simply pointed down the road and said, "Your funeral. Friendly place," Lisa muttered as they drove away. The road to Delacroix Manor was barely more than a dirt track, overgrown and pitted with potholes. Trees pressed close on either side, their branches creating a tunnel that blocked out what remained of the daylight. The van's headlights seemed to make the darkness worse somehow, pushing it back but never dispelling it. Then they saw it. Laughter had filled the air as they approached, but it died in their throats as the looming silhouette of the house emerged from the fog. Delacroix Manor was massive, 3 stories of Victorian Gothic architecture gone to seed. Its windows gaped open like hungry mouths, several broken, others merely dark. The wind whistled through them, creating a sound that was almost musical, almost welcoming. The front door hung slightly ajar. "Well," Max said with forced enthusiasm, checking his equipment, "this is it. Everyone ready." "Ready as I'll ever be," Jake muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. They gathered their gear and approached the house. The porch steps groaned under their weight, wood soft with rot. Sarah paused to photograph the entrance. The peeling paint, the tarnished brass fixtures, the way the door seemed to invite them in. As they crossed the threshold, the door creaked ominously behind them. They all turned to look, but it had only moved slightly. Not closed, just adjusted. They exchanged nervous glances. The air inside was stale and heavy with disuse, cloaked in an eerie stillness that felt almost physical. It was the silence of a held breath. Dust danced in their flashlight beams as they ventured deeper into the heart of the manor, their footsteps echoing on warped hardwood floors. The foyer was grand in the way of old money, or what remained of it. A sweeping staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate patterns now thick with grime. A chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals dulled by years of neglect, some missing entirely. The wallpaper was a faded floral pattern, peeling away in long strips that looked like dead skin. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice slightly too loud in the oppressive quiet. "Let's set up camp in the living room." They found it off to the right, a large room with a fireplace, several pieces of furniture still present though draped in dusty sheets. They cleared off a threadbare couch, pushing away layers of dust and cobwebs while the atmosphere seemed to thicken around them like an impending storm. "This is perfect," Max said, setting up his equipment. He had an EMF meter, a digital voice recorder, a thermal camera, and several other devices that Jake didn't understand. "We'll use this as base camp. If anything happens, we come back here." "When anything happens, you mean?" Greg said with a forced grin. "We're gonna get so much footage. This place is creepy as hell." They spent the first hours settling in and sharing ghost stories. The nervous laughter that punctuated their tales seemed to dispel some of the oppressive atmosphere. Clangs and creaks from deeper in the house became background noise. Explainable old houses made sounds. Greg insisted on narrating the legend of the Lady in White, an apparition said to roam the halls of Delacroix Manor, searching for her lost love. According to local lore, she'd been the daughter of the manor's original owner, and her fiancé had disappeared the night before their wedding in 1892. She'd spent the rest of her life searching the house for him, eventually dying here, alone and mad with grief. And they say, Greg concluded with theatrical flair, that she still searches, still calls his name, still waits by the window of her bedroom, watching for him to return. The group listened eagerly, though Jake remained glued to his position near the door, eyeing the shadows that seemed to skirt the walls independent of their flashlights. As night fell completely and darkness wrapped around the manor like a suffocating blanket, they turned to their devices, testing them for supernatural presence. The excitement was palpable. The thrill of the unknown surged through them like an electric current. Max activated his voice recorder, asking standard questions into the silence. "Is anyone here with us? Can you give us a sign of your presence?" Sarah filmed everything, her camera's eye capturing the dust motes that seemed to swirl in patterns, the shadows that gathered in corners, the way the light never quite reached certain spaces. But as midnight approached, the witching hour, the atmosphere changed. The merriment faded like the last light of day. The temperature dropped noticeably. Their breath began to mist. Then came the crash from the kitchen. Chapter 2. The kitchen. The sound was explosive in the silence. The unmistakable noise of dishes shattering, of furniture being overturned. It came from the back of the house, down a corridor they hadn't yet explored. For a moment, no one moved. They stared at each other in the flashlight beams, uncertainty and excitement warring on their faces. "Well," Max said, grabbing his recorder and EMF meter, "that's our first sign of activity. Let's go investigate." "Maybe it was just something falling," Lisa suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Only one way to find out," Greg said, though he'd gone noticeably pale. With hesitant hearts, they gathered their flashlights and ventured toward the sound. Jake brought up the rear, constantly glancing over his shoulder at the darkness that seemed to follow them. The corridor leading to the kitchen was narrow and oppressive. Pictures lined the walls, family portraits from another era, all featuring the same stern-faced people. Max paused to examine them, his flashlight revealing something unsettling. In every portrait, no matter the angle or distance, the subject's eyes seemed to be looking directly at the viewer. "Creepy," Lisa whispered. "Common trick of perspective in old paintings," Greg said, but he quickened his pace past them. The kitchen was a tableau of chaos. Chairs were upturned, their legs jutting into the air like the limbs of dead insects. Dishes lay shattered across the floor, though upon closer inspection, Sarah noticed they were covered in dust. They'd been sitting on those shelves for decades, undisturbed, until moments ago. But the most disturbing detail was the arrangement. The broken dishes formed a pattern on the floor, almost like words, though in no language any of them recognized. And the chairs weren't just knocked over randomly. They were positioned deliberately, pointing toward the far wall, toward a door they hadn't noticed. Jake, who had been lingering further back, clutched his arms and stepped away from the kitchen entrance. "This ain't right, guys. Let's just go." "Go? And miss this?" Max waved his recorder like a trophy, oblivious to Jake's growing unease. His EMF meter was going crazy, the lights flashing in rapid sequence. "The spirits are just getting started. Look at these readings." "Max, he's right," Lisa said quietly. "This feels wrong. Not fun wrong. Dangerous wrong." But Max was already examining the door in the far wall, the one the chairs were pointing toward. It was smaller than the others, perhaps a pantry or cellar entrance. The wood was darker, older than the rest of the house, and it had 3 locks on it, all of which were unlocked. "When was the last time you saw a pantry that locked from the outside?" Sarah asked, her camera trained on the door. "Maybe it's not to keep something out," Greg said. "Maybe it's to keep something in." "Only one way to find out," Max said, reaching for the handle. "Don't." Jake's voice cracked. "Max, please. Let's just document what we've found and—" The door swung open before Max touched it. Beyond was a staircase descending into absolute darkness. The air that wafted up was cold and damp, carrying a smell like earth and mold and something else. Something organic and wrong. Max's EMF meter screamed, all the lights blazing solid red. "Now this is what I'm talking about," Max breathed, excitement overriding caution. "Real paranormal activity. Sarah, you getting this?" "Yeah," Sarah said, but her hands were shaking. Through the camera's viewfinder, she could see something the others couldn't. In the darkness at the bottom of the stairs, there was movement. A shifting in the shadows that suggested form, that suggested presence. She lowered the camera. "Max, I don't think we should go down there." "Are you kidding? This is exactly what we came for." Max was already starting down the stairs, his flashlight beam swallowed quickly by the dark below. After a collective sigh and exchange of worried glances, they followed. "Because that's what you did. You didn't let your friends go into the darkness alone." The stairs were steep and the wood was rotten in places. Jake nearly fell through a broken step, catching himself at the last moment. The smell grew stronger as they descended, that wrong, organic smell that made their stomachs turn. The basement was vast, stretching beyond the reach of their flashlights. The ceiling was low, supported by thick wooden beams. The floor was dirt, packed hard over decades. And throughout the space, scattered like seeds, were objects, personal belongings. A watch, a wallet, a driver's license from 1987, a class ring, a child's teddy bear, stained and rotting. "Oh God," Lisa whispered. "These are from people who came here, who disappeared here." "We need to leave," Jake said firmly. "Now. We need to leave now and call the police." "He's right," Sarah agreed, lowering her camera. "This isn't haunted. This is a crime scene." But when they turned to go back up the stairs, the door at the top slammed shut. The sound echoed through the basement like a gunshot, followed by the distinctive click of locks engaging. They ran up the stairs, Max in the lead, and threw themselves against the door. It didn't budge. The wood didn't even vibrate under their assault. It was as if the door had become part of the wall, sealed seamlessly. "No, no, no, no," Max muttered, pounding uselessly. His recorder fell from his pocket, tumbling down the stairs behind them. In the silence after it stopped rolling, they heard something else. A voice from the darkness of the basement. Female, young, filled with sorrow. "Finally," it whispered. "You came back." Chapter 3. The Lady in White. They froze on the stairs, flashlights pointed down into the basement, trying to pierce the darkness that seemed too thick, too solid. "Who's there?" Max called out, his voice cracking slightly. The darkness shifted, coalesced, and she appeared. the lady in white. She stood at the far end of the basement, her form translucent and flickering like a projection. Her dress had once been beautiful, a wedding gown elaborate and expensive, from another era. But it was stained now, the white fabric marked with dark patches that looked disturbingly like blood. Her face was beautiful and terrible, young, perhaps 20, with features frozen in an expression of profound sorrow. Her eyes were completely black, like holes into nothing. "You came back," she said again, her voice echoing strangely, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "You always come back. They said you would." "We're not who you think we are," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm. We're just visiting. We didn't mean to disturb you." The lady in white tilted her head, studying them. "They all say that. But you came. You were called. The house called and you came." "Look," Greg said, his usual humor completely absent. "We're very sorry for trespassing. If you could just let us go, we'll leave and never come back. We won't tell anyone about the others?" The lady in white gestured at the scattered belongings on the basement floor. "About all the others who were called and came and stayed? What happened to them?" Sarah asked, still filming despite her shaking hands. Some part of her artist's mind noted the tragedy in the ghost's form, the poetry of her sorrow. The lady in white's expression shifted, anger flickering across her features. "The same thing that happens to all who enter uninvited. The house takes, the house keeps, the house hungers. The house." Max's scientific mind, even in terror, sought to understand. "The house itself is, what, conscious? The house is old. Older than you know. Built on ground that was cursed long before the first stone was laid." The lady in white moved closer, not walking but gliding, her feet not quite touching the dirt floor. "My father knew. When he built this place, he knew. But he built it anyway because he thought he could control it. Use it." She was halfway across the basement now, close enough that they could see through her, could see the way the light passed through her form. "He was wrong. The house used him, used all of us, fed on us. And when we were gone, it waited. And others came, and it fed, and waited. And you came. How do we leave?" Jake asked bluntly. "Tell us how to leave and we will. We'll do whatever you want." The lady in white stopped, tilting her head again in that unsettling way. "Leave? But you just arrived. The house has been so lonely. It wants company. It wants completion." "Completion?" Sarah lowered her camera. "What does that mean? 5 then, 5 now, 5 always?" The lady in white said, her voice becoming sing-song childlike. "That's how many it needs. To finish what was started. To seal what was opened." "There were 5 people in your family," Sarah said, pieces clicking together. "You, your parents, your 2 siblings. The article said 5 people disappeared. 5 to open the door. 5 to keep it open. 5 to feed what waits below." The lady in white's form began to flicker more rapidly. "And now 5 more. How perfect. How complete." The basement began to change around them. The dirt floor seemed to shift, to breathe. The walls expanded, growing more distant. And from below, from beneath the packed earth, they heard movement. Something large. Something awake and aware and hungry. The temperature dropped even further. Ice formed on the wooden beams, spreading like crystalline veins. "I'm sorry," the lady in white said, and for a moment her expression was genuinely sorrowful. "I was like you once. I didn't want this. But the house requires payment. And the debt must be paid." The earth beneath them cracked. Chapter 4: What Lies Beneath. They scrambled back up the stairs as the basement floor split open, revealing darkness beneath the darkness. Not a pit or a hole, but an absence. A void that hurt to look at, that suggested depths that shouldn't exist beneath a house, beneath the earth, beneath reality itself. "The door!" Greg shouted, throwing himself against it. "We have to get through the door." They all joined him, 5 bodies slamming against unyielding wood. Max fumbled for his phone, thinking maybe he could call for help, but there was no signal. There had been no signal since they'd entered the house. Below them, the void expanded, and from it came sounds, whispers in languages that predated humanity, movements that suggested forms too large for the space they occupied, a wet breathing that spoke of something ancient and patient and utterly alien. 5 then, 5 now. The lady in white intoned from below, her form beginning to dissolve, becoming part of the darkness. The ritual is complete. The door is open. The debt is paid. Jake! Max shouted over the sounds from below. Do something. You always have a plan. Jake, pale and shaking, took a quick breath and focused. He'd noticed something the others hadn't. The door they were trying to open had hinges on this side, which meant it opened inward, not outward. Stop pushing, he yelled. Pull. We need to pull. They adjusted, all of them gripping the edges of the door, the crack where it met the frame, anything they could get leverage on. And they pulled. The door resisted, but then, slowly, it began to give. Behind them, something vast was rising from the void. They could feel it. A presence so massive and malevolent that their minds refused to fully comprehend it. Sarah risked a glance back and immediately wished she hadn't. What she saw would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. Something with too many limbs and not enough form. Something that existed in more dimensions than 3. Something that had been waiting beneath Delacroix Manor for a very, very long time. The door gave way suddenly, all 5 of them tumbling backward into the kitchen. Without discussion, without thought, they ran. Through the kitchen, down the corridor, the portrait's eyes following them, mouths now open in silent screams. Into the foyer. The front door stood open, inviting. Escape just steps away. They didn't question it. They ran. Out onto the porch, down the rotting steps, across the overgrown lawn toward where they'd parked the van, which wasn't there. They stood in the driveway, panting, and looked around in confusion and growing horror. The van was gone. But more than that, the driveway was different. Overgrown. As if no vehicle had driven on it in years. Max checked his phone. Still no signal. But the date. That's not right, he muttered. That can't be right. What? Lisa demanded. According to my phone, it's November 7th. So? We came here on November 1st. Max looked up at them, his face ashen. According to this, we've been in there for 6 days. That's impossible, Greg said. We were only in there for a few hours. It's still night. But even as he said it, they could see the sky beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. They turned to look back at Delacroix Manor. It stood silent and dark, windows empty, door now closed. As if nothing had happened. As if it were simply an abandoned house, waiting patiently for the next visitors. We need to leave, Jake said. Now. We walk to town if we have to, but we need to leave this place. They started walking, following the overgrown driveway back toward the main road. None of them spoke. They were all too shaken, too confused, too traumatized by what they'd experienced. It was Sarah who noticed it first. She'd been filming as they fled, habit overriding terror. Now, in the growing light, she played back the footage. Guys, she said, her voice strange. Look at this. They huddled around her camera's screen, watching the playback. It showed them running through the kitchen, down the corridor. But in the footage, they weren't alone. 5 translucent figures ran with them. Behind them, overlapping them. 5 people in old-fashioned clothing. Family. Parents and 3 children. The Delacroix family. And as the footage continued, showing them bursting out the front door, the 5 ghostly figures stopped at the threshold, unable to cross, trapped, watching their replacements flee into the dawn. 5 then, 5 now, Sarah whispered, understanding finally dawning. 5 to open the door, 5 to keep it open. But we got out, Lisa said. We escaped. Did we? Max was staring at his hands. In the growing daylight, they looked wrong, slightly translucent, pale in a way that wasn't just shock. They looked at each other in the dawn light and saw the same wrongness reflected in each other's faces. The same pallor, the same not quite solid quality. Behind them, in the direction of the manor they could no longer see, they heard it. Faint but clear. The sound of a car. An engine. Voices raised in nervous excitement as a new group of explorers approached Delacroix Manor. 5 then, 5 now, 5 always. The wind seemed to whisper. The debt is paid. The door is open. The house is patient. They stood on the road, watching the sun rise, and slowly understood what the lady in white had really meant when she said, "I was like you once." The house didn't keep its victims inside. It let them go, let them leave, let them think they'd escaped. But they carried the house with them, in them, through them. They were the echoes now, the forgotten, the ones who would haunt without understanding they were haunting, the ones who would be dismissed as stories, as urban legends, as the local ghosts that people would tell tales about. Just as the Delacroix family had become stories before them. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, beneath the foundations of a cursed manor, beneath reality itself, something vast and patient and utterly alien settled back into waiting. Federal satisfied. For now. Epilogue: The new visitors. The group of 6 college students arrived at Delacroix Manor just as the sun crested the horizon, their laughter and nervous chatter filling the morning air. "This is it," one of them shouted. "The most haunted house in Black Hollow. I heard 5 people disappeared here last week," another said. "Just vanished. They found their car but no sign of them. Urban legend," a third scoffed. "Probably just took off. People do that sometimes." They approached the house, flashlights and cameras ready, eager for adventure, for content, for proof. And standing at the edge of the property, unseen and unseeable, 5 figures watched them go. Max, Lisa, Greg, Sarah, and Jake, fading slowly into the morning mist, already forgetting what had happened to them, already becoming the echoes, the whispers, the warnings that no one would heed. The front door of Delacroix Manor swung open, welcoming the new visitors. And deep below, something stirred in its endless hunger. The cycle continued. The house was patient, and the echoes of the forgotten would warn and warn and warn. But no one ever listened. The end. In Black Hollow, they still tell stories about Delacroix Manor. About the groups of young people who go in and never come out, or come out changed, wrong, translucent in certain lights. About the lady in white who searches for her lost love. About the voices that whisper warnings that no one heeds. The locals know better than to go near that place. But outsiders never listen to local warnings. The house stands patient. The void below remains hungry. And the echoes of the forgotten continue their eternal, futile attempts to warn the living. Some houses are more than buildings. Some places are more than locations. Some debts can never be fully paid, only passed on.